back again. So we're just some few minutes into the program, and then we're going to kickstart the conversation again. We have just about 2 hours artificial presentation. So I want you all to go along with me in this beautiful presentation that we have tonight. As we prepare for all the platforms, and then we can go ahead and start, the program. Ekale, Bubu, Enyamo, Iramalade, and welcome to the live transmission. Today is the 5th of October, 2023. And we're still very good with the time. It's just about 10 minutes past 10 p.m. local time in London. Because about the focus, I might not be looking at the comment. So I say good evening. And to buffet shake coffee at the tea before the presentation starts. Because it's going to be a lot of reading. So, and as soon as the bati bere, monile mawo screen. So, Moki Professor Banji Akintoye Timofe lo presentation wọn lálẹ́ láti fi educate and enlighten us again tonight. Kí ni topic tá fi sọ̀rọ̀ lé lórí? It is called Towards the Yoruba Self-Determination. The Yoruba nation chooses the noble path to its noble goal. Professor Banji Akintoye, a 35-page manuscript. So we are just 5 minutes into the program. So once again, get your pen and paper so that Kigbuguale take as much note. Okay, Kigbuguale and Konse. And I welcome you all. So I believe all the platforms are ready to go. And we should now have ample of time to start the discussion. I'm going to try and raise my voice a little bit, but bear with me that it is already late and the voice might not be as sharp as it's meant to be, but I'll try my best. Okay, what's that? All right, we're almost ready to go into the conversation. You can also call somebody in. Kawagbo, what was the 35 manual page Baba Akintoye released some few years ago towards the Yoruba nation self-determination? A very good evening and welcome. We will not have time to start mentioning everybody's name. So There's no time for that tonight because of the time limit. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. All right. So we're good to go. Before we start the program, hope everyone can hear me loud and clear. If you can hear me loud and clear, let me know in the comment section before we start the program. I hope everyone can hear me loud and clear. If you can hear me loud and clear, please do let me know in the comment section. Okay, thank you so much. All right. So I just need the other last screen in case I need to look into that screen. A very good evening once again to every one of us, and welcome to the late night conversation. All right, so we're good to go. I guess everything is ready. All right. I know there's a bit of noise at the background. Hopefully, it will not be too much into the program. Okay, I need to mute this one. Yeah, that one is muted. All right. So, in Timofekai, Owani Ori website me, which is koikimedia.com, just in case you need a copy for yourself. Ede Gesi Lamafika, because Ede Gesi no Wafiko. This was about almost 2 years now. The document itiwanita. Bialato Doenio. There's nothing I can do to that. So you'll have to manage the voice. I can bring it close to me. Let's bring the camera close to me a little bit. Let's move them close to me. And let's move this close to me. So, Elima Bomidada. And then let's move these close to me as well. All right. Towards the Yoruba self-determination, Yoruba nation chooses the noble path to its noble goal. A manner of the Yoruba self-determination struggle for all the Yoruba self-determination advocates at home and in the diaspora. Professor Adebanji Akintoye. Introduction. The following is a guide or manual for the use of all the Yoruba patriots engaged in the struggle for the Yoruba self-determination. It supplies to all the supporters of the self-determination struggle the kinds of information that they will need to prosecute the struggle, and it supplies guides to the struggle strategies and methods. Though this manual was motivated in the context of one main organization, Ilana Omo Odua, it is meant to be a fighting manual for all persons and organizations that are engaged in the struggle for the Yoruba self-determination and sovereignty. Very importantly, it is based on the fundamental character of the Yoruba nation as a civilization-building nation, a nation with goodwill and hospitality towards all other nationalities. It is also based on the humble and sincere obedience of all persons working for Yoruba self-determination to manifest demand of the whole Yoruba nation. The demand that the struggle for the Yoruba self-determination must be peaceful, law-abiding, knowledge-driven, purpose-driven, and disciplined. This manual is also intended to provide to the wide world the basic details of the Yoruba nation's reasons for now seeking to assert its self-determination and sovereignty, and separate from Nigeria, namely the Yoruba people's devastating experience in Nigeria, the progressive and now almost total destruction of democracy in Nigeria, the primitive and the blood-curdling agenda of ethnic cleansing and genocide in Nigeria, the constant human brutalization, pains and death, and regime of crimes against humanity in Nigeria, the altogether pulling of Nigeria relentlessly down into utter barbarism, a land of unimaginable, almost subhuman viciousness of man against man, a land in which humans violently take all substance, all hope, and all life from other humans with casual abandon hour by hour, a land in which human blood is spilled continually into a swelling stream of human blood. Having evolved and lived a life of civilized culture for thousands of years, a culture of tender respect for life, for property, for differences in human conditions, circumstances, and choice, and for foreign people of different cultures and tongues. The Yoruba nation now seeks to take its life into its own hands as a civilization building nation in the world and to save its people from further exposure to the Nigerian culture of brutality, destructiveness, perpetual violence upon religious freedom, relentless bloodletting, and the push towards utter barbarism. The Yoruba nation's past glory. The Yoruba nation past glories. We Yoruba nation came into Nigeria in 1914 with a great history. We had developed great intellectual traditions since the millennium before then. The best in modern research has shown that we, the Yoruba, had known binary mathematics and had been using it in times as early as 500 BC, which binary mathematics was not known to the Europeans until recent times, and which became the basis for making of the computer in the 1950s. Since the 9th century AD, we had been a progressively urbanizing people. By the time the first European explorer and traders came to the West African coast in about 1470 AD, we had already had large towns and cities in almost all parts of our homeland. Large towns and cities located at a short distance from one another. By the 18th century, we were one of the most urbanized peoples in the world. In our towns and cities, we had evolved a sophisticated and gorgeous monarchy system of government and socialite and individual norms known as Omoluabi, which clothed every individual with respect and a sense of duty, probity, and responsibility, and a political system based on the profound ideas of democracy, such as fundamental beliefs that power belongs to the people, that only the people can select their rulers, that while the people honor their rulers, the rulers also seriously respect their people, that the individual has the right to express himself and contribute to decision-making in society, that the individual is free to choose, practice, and propagate his or her religious faith, that the foreigner deserves to be welcomed, accepted, and included, etc. We had also evolved sophisticated economic system, featuring advanced farming, manufacturers, and craft, the foremost art tradition in Black Africa, and a commercial culture featuring great trade in our homeland, as well as commercial links and the diaspora trading communities across most of tropical Africa. When the European missionaries brought Christian message and Western education to Africa in the mid-19th century, our urban civilization made it possible for our Yoruba land to benefit much faster from the education than any other part of Africa. The first newspaper, Black Africa, was published in our city of Abeokuta in 1859, and others soon follow in some of the other cities. By 1860s, we were already producing a growing class of university graduates and highly educated professionals. By the 1914, the year of Nigeria's amalgamation, we were already considerably rich in Western education, whereas schools did not come to most of the rest of Nigeria until the 1920s, by which time many Yoruba families were already producing their third generation of university graduates. No other Nigerian nationality produced their first university graduate until the mid-1930s. In the course of the 1950s, we Yoruba seriously expanded our lead in education by starting the first free education program in Nigeria and Africa. We became the leader and the pace setter in most other aspects of the modern development in Nigeria and in Africa. Ours is a large and prestigious nation. At about 56 million in population in Nigeria, we are the largest single nationality in Nigeria and in Black Africa, even without counting millions of Yoruba people in the neighboring Benin and Togo Republic. If we Yoruba of Nigeria were a country on our own today, our country would be one of the largest 20th countries in the world. Our homeland in Nigeria is larger than the territory of the United Kingdom and larger than the territories of most countries of Europe and the world. Though our population is only 26% of Nigerians' population. We command over 50% of the Nigerians' university graduates and a larger proportion of Nigerian professionals. Our homeland accounts for over 65% of Nigeria's industrial capacity and productivity and pays about the same proportion of the federal taxes. Yoruba nation's devastating experience in Nigeria. But since the independence of Nigeria in 1960, the prevailing trends in the management of the Nigerian affairs have resulted in serious, relentlessly retrogression for all the peoples of Nigeria, including significantly our Yoruba nation. These trends have intensified viciously in the recent years and are intensifying more and more today. The universal prognosis concerning Nigeria point to worse and worse conditions of poverty, deprivation, insecurity, human suffering, and even outright barbarism and ultimate dissolution. Hereunder, as we bring before the international community the abominably horrors of our Yoruba people experience in Nigeria, a shocked world we concede that there is more than overwhelmingly justification for our seeking our nation's exit from Nigeria and for our nation's exit from Nigeria. At Nigeria's independence in 1960, coldly calculated projections of the British interest by the British officials, of the British need to continue to exercise major influences on the Nigerian economy after independence, produced sordid manipulations that imposed on the Nigeria a federal government dominated by the Fulani of the northwestern Nigeria, the least educated Nigerian nationality and the least ready to provide a progressive leadership. To an ambitious modern country like Nigeria, Fulani fears of the much more educated Nigerian peoples, especially the Yoruba, the Igbo, and some others, became the driving force behind the management of Nigerian affairs. Nigeria progressively descended into massive impunity, crooked manipulations, of governmental processes, corruption, balance and gross inequality, amounting to gross abuses of most Nigerian people's effort to use the powers of government to impose the fundamentalist Islamic religion of the rulers on the peoples with various other religions, mostly Christians, moderate Muslims, and traditional religionists. Massive abuses of human and religious freedom, fundamentalist Islamic terror, and the widespread repression. Most of these being inflicted on Nigerian people during the long stretch of military dictatorship led by the northern military dictators. In 1973, a military dictator called for elections in response to the popular demand for return Nigeria to civilian rule. A rich Yoruba philanthropist won the presidential election resoundingly, surprisingly, even in regions beyond his Yoruba home base. But just as the final election results were being announced, the military dictator showed up on the national television and announced that the whole election was being annulled without giving any reasons for the annulment. A mightier democratic uproar, mostly based in the Yoruba part of Nigeria, greeted this announcement overwhelmed. He reigned and handed over to a handpicked civilian, not the winner of the election. But another military officer stepped in and took over from the hapless civilian and then proceed with utter violence to suppress. The democratic response state created assassination gangs, went after members of the Yoruba political elite, killed many of them in their homes or in the street, and forced very many to flee abroad, where they lived as poor groups of exile in various foreign countries for years until the killer dictator died suddenly in the mid-1998. Inevitably, we Yoruba nation became intensively devastated by the deepening disaster of the Nigeria. The military dictatorship seized important Yoruba assets that had been created in the 1952-1962 democratic era in the Western region, schools and hospitals that had been established by the state government, private agencies, and individual persons that had enjoyed very competent management by their founders. They are also seized the proud university that the Yoruba people had built in Ile-Ife in 1959 to 1962, as well as the Yoruba crop export management systems, radio and television institution, even the Yoruba regional sports stadium, etc. Most of such assets were then poorly managed or deliberately allowed to decline or even perished. Even though the Yoruba region continued to be the region commanding most of Nigeria's crumbling economy, ever-intensifying poverty became the lot of the Yoruba people themselves. The quality of the Yoruba political leadership rapidly declined as many Yoruba leaders became stuck into the insensitive and horribly undemocratic governance and the arrogant and all-pervading public corruption that have become characteristics of Nigeria. In these circumstances, the Yoruba people have been seriously hampered from exercising the spirit of enterprise and service to society for which their nation has been proud throughout its long history. In Nigeria, that is a control by the people with appetite or even hostility to modern Western education. The quality of the Yoruba education has been essentially destroyed. Yoruba language has declined and now, according to the scholars of language, faces the threat of extinction. To destroy Yoruba knowledge of and the pride in their history, a Nigerian federal military government prohibited the teaching of history in schools. Agriculture became neglected until famine has come to have in the Yoruba region the image of an occupation fit for the aged, the poor, and the illiterate. until Yoruba land came to depend mostly on food importations. By 1962, cocoa export by the Yoruba farmers were the main source of funding the Western region, ambitiously development programs, and the main foreign exchange earner for Nigeria. By the early 1980s, the Yoruba cocoa export under the hostile control by the military dictatorship had dwindled almost to zero. With the economy depressed, unemployment has escalated relentlessly among educated Yoruba youth, forcing many to go into crimes, into drug abuse, or into criminal cults, and forcing many more to flee the country, to flee to other countries in the world. Yoruba youth are regularly among West African youth who, in desperation, attempt to reach Southern Europe through the Sahara Desert and the Mediterranean Sea, who regularly died in droves in the desert and in the sea or end up in slavery in countries of the Maghreb. In summary, the Yoruba people are experiencing a degree of poverty, of loss, of moral, of hopelessness, of disorientation, unknown before in their history, in spite of their very strong cultural unity, in spite of their tradition, unity around many exalted principles. The Yoruba almost constantly looked disunited and conflict-prone in Nigeria, largest in population in Nigeria and in Africa, the most educated in Nigeria and Africa, and a nation with a very large influential diaspora in most countries of the world. The Yoruba do often do like small and impotent group in Nigeria. Increasingly, the Nigerian experience confronts the Yoruba region with the probability of a devastating revolt among the huge masses of its educated but unemployed and neglected youth. Ultimately, the worst degradation suffered by the Yoruba nation in Nigeria began in 2014. Since then, heavily armed Fulani herdsmen and militias from the northwestern Nigeria have been coming to Yoruba land and to the homeland of all other peoples of Nigerian Middle Belt, South, rampaging, destroying farms and villages, killing farmers and farmers' families, invading homes and holding husbands and fathers at gunpoint while raping their wives and daughters, inflicting gruesome wounds on women and killing them after raping them, threatening to conquer, subdue the indigenous owners of the land, threatening to even banish most peoples from their homeland, or even to exterminate some. Hard to believe the Nigerian federal government, the only controller of security forces in Nigeria, military, police, and secret services, stolidly ignore these criminal activities of the Fulani marauders and terrorists, and seem, in fact, to have ordered the security forces not to interfere with the marauders and terrorists, with the result that marauders and terrorists are able to carry sophisticated assault rifle publicly. The Fulani herdsmen and the militias have been coming to seize land all over the Yoruba land, threatening to banish the Yoruba from their homeland, and having been bringing countless Fulani flocks from other countries of West Africa to seize and possess land in Yoruba land and other territories of the Middle Belt and the South. Many Yoruba farmers have been forced to abandon farming altogether. Yoruba entrepreneurs who embark on modern farming enterprise are regularly targeted and their enterprises destroyed, burnt down, otherwise vandalized by the Fulani marauders, and the farm owners themselves killed. The intensive marauding in the Middle Belt, where the killings have been most virulent and where hundreds of thousands of farming people have been displaced from their villages to internal displaced people's camps, threatening to cut off most of the traditional Middle Belt food supplies to the Yoruba Southwest and other parts of the South. United Nations agencies are predicting a devastating famine in Nigeria, and Yoruba land starting from the late 2020. The Fulani rampage are thus putting unbearable pressures on the already weakening Yoruba economy in general. Even the large Yoruba cities have come under these disasters to as millions of uneducated and unskilled youth, as well as masses of beggars, have been deliberately pushed by some influential Fulani persons to migrate to the Yoruba Southwest, where they are building up into devastating burden on the Yoruba society and economy. Having deliberately failed to provide modern education for their people, the Fulani leadership of the Northwest is now pushing millions of their uneducated and unskilled youth, as well as beggars, to the south, especially to the Yoruba Southwest. Even under the desperate necessary federal ban on interstate travel in an attempt to control the spread of the coronavirus pandemic, many thousands of the northern youth, sometimes accompanied or followed by truckloads of sophisticated weapons, are being increasingly trucked into Yoruba land, where they have been establishing terrorist hideouts in the farmland and forest. With the hostile and Maridwan terrorist Fulani thus dug into and digging more and more into hundreds of hideouts in the Yoruba farmlands and forest, with massive buildup of illiterate and unskilled northern youth and beggars in all Yoruba towns and cities, with the discovery by the police that many of these youth carry concealed assault weapons supplied to them from their home areas in the Northwest, with continued Fulani destruction of Yoruba farms, villages, farmsteads, the killings of the Yoruba farmers and rural flocks, the Fulani kidnapping and killing of the people in the rural areas and along highways, the increasing abandonment of farming by the Yoruba farmers, and the escalation of the homegrown crime under the cover of Fulani invasion. The whole Yoruba nation feels as if it is being strangulated in Nigeria today. The traditionally a democratic Yoruba people can no longer hope to change these situations. By any democratic election, since Nigeria elections are now always idiotically concocted with massive violence and corruption that government agencies and the powerful officials and politicians bring into every election, even in the present, and to the consternation of foreign observers from international agencies and the leading countries of the world, altogether seems now to have advanced to the precipice of a terminal catalysm, a huge, unimaginable, fiendish, and all-devastating holocaust, in spite of Nigerian federal government claims that the fundamentalist terrorist organization, Boko Haram, is being fought and reduced in the Nigerian Northeast. The manifest reality is that Boko Haram has been flourishing and expanding and now stand at the peak of its power. The Nigerian armed force cannot, or most non-Fulani Nigerians believe, do not want to win any decisive victory against the Boko Haram. From many reports, the official policy of recruiting converted Boko Haram terrorists into the Nigerian army is giving Boko Haram a chance to target and destroy indigenous military officers and servicemen, including the Yoruba. Within the armed force, meanwhile, dangerous foreign terrorist organizations have entered onto the scene. ISIS, from the land of their defeat, Iraq and Syria, and Al-Qaeda, from the Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, Akin, from this Libya, some sort of collaboration has manifestly evolved, link the Fulani Maridun forces, Boko Haram, ISIS, and Al-Qaeda for the purpose of overrunning of Nigeria, imposing Fulani and other terrorist fundamentalists as rulers over all the indigenous nationalities of Nigeria, then employing the resources of Nigeria to overrun all of the West Africa, to convert West Africa into the base of fundamentalist terror against the rest of the world. Towards this end, Boko Haram and ISIS cells have spread all over Nigeria, far north and middle belt, bringing devastating violence to many parts of Nigerian north, and are being discovered in the part of Nigerian south, including the Yoruba region of southwestern Nigeria. The United States warned in early March 2021 that ISIS was preparing to launch a major attack on southern Nigeria, beginning from the Yoruba cosmopolitan city of Lagos. There is an all-pervading danger and fear that a particular horrible future awaits Nigeria, a future in which mass killings become the norm, in which Fulani and other terrorists are killing in large numbers, mainly raping and destroying, and the Fulani flocks, guilty of violence or not, are feared and resented and treated as dangerous elements and set upon and killed among most people of Nigeria. A horrible complex web of dark and menace cloud has thus been woven into the sky over Nigeria. It is being compounded relentlessly, portending unimaginable horror that could spread ruin and horrific human suffering over the whole of West Africa. For the enlightenment of an increasing shock world, we must add that the Fulani rampage in Nigeria are today's phase of the ancient war of Western Istik and later Arab and the Arab-related peoples upon the peoples of the Black African race. The war that suppressed the original black builders of the civilization of the ancient Egypt, the war that has since 7th century AD been persistently pushing the black peoples from the territories of the North Africa, the Nile Valley, towards the south. The latest major victory of the invaders was the 19th century Fulani conquest of the large Hausa nation, the largest black nation north of the river Niger. The Hausa people, being mostly Muslims, made the mistake of regarding the Fulani War of ethnic conquest as a war for the reform and expansion of Islam, and therefore massively supported the Fulani invaders and thereby helped the conquest of their own nation by the comparatively few Fulani. As things stand today, the once splendid Hausa nation has been ruthlessly polarized and destroyed. Every ancient Hausa kingdom is now ruled by the Fulani emirs. Every state in the Hausa land in Nigeria is ruled by a Fulani state governor. Grotesque social phenomenon of Alimajiri, millions of uneducated, unskilled, abjectly poor millions of Hausa people who live as beggars in the street. Many significant Fulani voices are now saying that the Hausa nation has disappeared, that only the Hausa language has survived. The Fulani are now striving to expand that kind of conquest and destructions to the land of all the indigenous African peoples of Nigerian Middle Belt and the South, even all of the West and Central Africa. Take note that what Fulani are doing in Nigeria, they are also doing in Central African Republic, and that if they succeed in subduing the major indigenous Yoruba and Igbo nations and the smaller nations of Nigeria, Delta and Middle Belt regions, and then control the enormous resources of Nigeria, they will be able to overrun the rest of West Africa. Take note also that the Fulani, finding the indigenous black nations of Nigeria too tough, have now brought international terrorists from the Middle East, ISIS from Iran, Iraq, and Syria, Al-Qaeda from the Islamic Maghreb, Al-Shabaab from Somalia, into the Nigerian war. And finally, very importantly, note that the Nigerian federal government under the former Fulani President Muhammadu Buhari has systematically replaced a non-Fulani officials with Fulani officials in the commanding positions in all agencies of Nigerian security services, army, police, secret service, port authority, custom services, etc. and says those nothing as ISIS and Al-Qaeda are reported to be bringing large quantities of weapons into Nigeria from Iran, Turkey, and Iraq, even as the United States government has raised alarm that ISIS has penetrated Nigeria from the Atlantic coast. And even as ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the homegrown terrorist organization Boko Haram have occupied and seized Niger State in the central Nigeria, next door to the Nigerian Federal Capital Territory, and only a short drive from the Nigerian Federal Capital City of Abuja. For the Black peoples of Africa and the world, the war of resistance by the Yoruba, Igbo, and the peoples of Nigerian Delta and Middle Belt is a war that must be won decisively. A brief historical outline at this point will help the readers understanding of the whole Nigerian situation. The constitutional framework for all the aberrations in management of Nigeria is the gradual and the relentless destruction of the federal order under which Nigeria had become independent in 1960. Until 1945, the British creators of Nigeria had pursued no clear policy for welding Nigeria together as one country, and the result had been that two distinct sections of the country, North and South, had essentially gone their different directions. The constitution that were written in 1945 to 1951 by the British for Nigeria became the first constitutions uniting Nigeria as one country out of the difference to the great ethnic diversity of Nigeria. This constitution ordered Nigeria as a federation of three regions. The North remained as one territorial, overwhelmingly large region, while the smaller but more thickly populated South was split into two regions, Eastern and Western region. Each region was more or less autonomous, managed its affairs with its elected officials ruling under the British supervision, controlled its own resources, developed in its own way, at its own pace, at its own coat of arms and flags, and even had a higher commissioner to represent its interest in London. At different times between 1957 and 1959, the three regions were granted their self-government and each appointed its indigenous regional governor to replace the supervising British official. Under this regional arrangement, the three regions competed loosely in developing effort and achieved considerable social, economic development for themselves and for Nigeria. The British manifestly preferred and manipulated the Fulani to be controllers of the large northern region as well as of the federal government. Even though the Fulani were a small part of the northern region, one of the smallest nationalities in Nigeria, and were the least educated, the most resistant to modern education among the peoples of Nigeria, that did not slow down the pace of development in the two regions of the South, the Eastern and the Western regions. In fact, the predominantly Yoruba Western region immediately shoot ahead of the other regions in the development race, developed and the most competent civil service in the country, led in infrastructural development, in industrialization, and in the provision of health and education services, even occasionally granted loans to the federal government. In 1955, the Western region achieved the most significant development of all by starting free primary school education, the first free education program in Nigeria and in Africa. But in Nigeria, that was dominated by the Fulani with the British support, the Western region was destined to pay a heavy price for its frontline achievement. The British colonial officials developed a more or less open hostility towards the Western region's Yoruba leadership and saw the Western region achievements as questioning the competence of the British colonial government and as a poise to obstruct British influence in Nigeria after independence. The Western region political leaders were therefore excluded by the British manipulations from the federal government that led Nigeria into independence. Immediately after independence, the Fulani controllers of the federal government decided that the western region needed to be subdued by federal power and be robbed of its capability to run always in the far front. This resulted in the federal covert operation, which, assisted by the British, split the typically disciplined Yoruba political leadership of the western region. The federal government then hurriedly barged in, declared that law and order had broken down in the western region, declared a state of emergency, there imposed a federally appointed sole administrator, sent the topmost Yoruba political leader to prison on the trumped-up treasonable charges. That was the beginning of the attack on the regional autonomy and on the federal principle in Nigerian affairs, and the beginning of the misfortunes of the Yoruba nation in Nigeria. After lifting the emergency, the federal government engaged in crooked effort to impose over the western region rigged elections. Some persons who were prepared to be servile to federal and Fulani control. Outraged Yoruba youth burst out in the late 1965 in a powerful and stubborn revolt that shook Nigeria to its foundations. The collapse of all order led to the first military takeover of government in Nigeria and started over 3 decades of military coups and military dictatorships. Since the northern controllers of the federal government had ensured a northerner predominantly among the military officers, succeeding coups were led by northerner officers, and resulting military rulers collaborated with the Fulani political elite to gradually suck all power and resources control into the hands of the federal government, and to fragment the old regions into smaller, impotent states. In summary, to the foist a northerner or a Fulani dictatorship upon Nigeria. In 1999, all the over-centralization was finally enriched in a constitution which a northern military dictator unilaterally produced and imposed on Nigeria by a decree claiming that it was written by we the people of Nigeria. Virtually all significant leaders of the peoples of the South and the Middle Belt, constituting about 75% of the population of Nigeria, have denounced the 1999 Constitution as a fraud and demanded constitutional restructuring that will return Nigeria to federalism. A visiting United Nations rapporteur commented in 2019 that the Nigerian 1999 Constitution is a pressure cooker for injustice, protest, and conflict. By the federal controllers have not only truculently rejected restructuring, they have meanwhile adopted utmost impunity in appointment of federal officials, resulting in the very troubling outcome, as we said before, that at the beginning of the 2021, under the Fulani president of Nigeria, the Fulani and the allied northerner element head all the security agencies in Nigeria: the military, the police, the secret services, the port authority, the customs services, the immigration, the federal judiciary, etc. By law, individual Nigerians can only buy foreign exchange from persons holding the license to sell, and in all parts of Nigeria, such licenses are Fulani or Hausa. No aspect of power or resources control is allocated exclusively to state government. The federal government is given control of the full 68 constitutional subject of power and control, called the Federal Exclusive List. Out of the 98 items in the Constitution, the remaining 30 items are classified as concurrent list. That is subject over which the federal and the state government concurrently have control, with the provision that whenever federal and state interests collide, the federal shall take the precedence. The state government are thus given exclusive control over nothing in the 1999 Constitution. For instance, the state governor is described as the chief security officer of a state, but the federal government also has power over the security in the state. And the Fulani control federal government can therefore countermand whatever security measure the state governor authorized in a state. Altogether, this is an apartheid system of government with small section of Nigeria holding to all power and control, and the indigenous peoples of the country amounting to 75% of Nigeria's population being ruled as conquered peoples. The ongoing invasion of the homeland of all indigenous peoples of Nigeria by the armed Fulani herdsmen working with the Fulani militias from all over West Africa, plus the collaboration of these with Boko Haram, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, put the imposition Fulani appointment on all security agencies in Nigeria, plus federal authority countermanding state security measures for protection of state citizens, all together are designed to facilitate, complete the total subjugation of all the indigenous peoples of Nigeria. This is a Fulani ethnic agenda, but the infusion by the Fulani of some Islamic purpose into the whole picture is helping to confuse some Muslim citizens of the invaded territories and therefore somewhat helping the invasion. However, Yoruba people are now aware that among the Yoruba persons who have had their farms and villages destroyed, and who have been killed, raped, kidnapped, etc., there have been more Muslims than non-Muslims together. Moreover, in the statement which the Fulani organizations, Fulani Nationality Movement, Mayati Allah, and others frequently issue to threaten the indigenous peoples of Nigeria, Yoruba Muslims are always described as infidels, unreliable people, and persons deserving to be killed and destroyed. Therefore, all Yoruba people, Muslims, Christians, Isheshe, are now fully aware that the Fulani invasion is simply a Fulani ethnic invasion, has no sincere Islamic purpose, and is only using Islam as its ideological weapon. The total picture as it has fully developed then is as follows. The Nigerian federal government under the Fulani president of Nigeria is relentlessly being turned into an instrument of the Fulani ethnic group and its agenda. Fulani and other militiamen imported in large masses into Nigeria are masquerading as herdsmen, all armed with sophisticated weapons, are ruthlessly ravaging the homelands of the indigenous peoples of Nigeria, including, surprisingly, the Hausa people, whose homeland the Fulani controlled since the 19th century, and killing men, women, children, destroying farms and villages and other assets of rural life, making a point of raping every woman in order to destroy the sense of self-respect of the various peoples, cutting down or burning tree crops, uprooting and destroying root crops, kidnapping people, extorting large amounts of money for ransom, killing kidnapped victims even after ransom had been paid. In all this, to say that these Fulani marauders are herdsmen and not terrorists in this situation is to perpetrate and promote a dangerous and destructive falsehood. Democracy has thus been effectively killed in Nigeria. The situation, the elections are no democratic exercise. They are mere affirmations of the despotic imposition of control by small section of Nigeria, and to repeat, they are always executed with massive official manipulations and rigging, massive use of bribes to electoral officials, massive buying of votes, and massive use of violence. To ensure maximum effectiveness for their invasion, the Fulani terrorists began in 2019 to collaborate with the well-known terrorist organizations Boko Haram, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Al-Shabaab. By 2020, terrorists from these organizations were already in the company of the Fulani terrorists. terrorizing all indigenous peoples of the northern Nigeria, and were soon identified in the far southern places like southwestern and southeastern Nigeria. The Fulani-led federal government of Nigeria never intervened to resist any of these terrorism. In fact, the experience of the victims of the terrorism has commonly been that federal security agencies hardly ever intervene to protect them against the terrorists. In fact, the operatives of the federal agency are frequently reported as colluding with Fulani killers. A former non-Fulani Nigerian Minister of Defense, General T.Y. Danjuma, publicly alerted non-Fulani Nigerians in 2019 that they must cease open and waiting to be protected by the federal security agencies, that the Nigerian military was not only not defending victims of the Fulani terror, but actually colluding with the killers, that the victims should defend themselves and their homes, and that those who rely on the federal agencies to defend them would all simply be killed one by one. Moreover, whenever any non-Fulani people take any step for defending themselves against the Fulani and other terrorists, the Fulani-led government intervenes immediately to countermand such measures. For instance, when the state government of the Yoruba Southwest largely created a local defense organization named Amotekun, the federal government denounced it as illegal and proceeded in various ways to make it ineffective. And when the governor of Ondo State ordered that the Fulani terrorists that have criminally dug themselves into some of the deep forests of Ondo, forests largely designated as official reserves since the British colonial times, should evacuate those forests, the federal government responded immediately that the governor did not have any exclusive authority to make such an order. The Nigerian police will not order the disarming of the Fulani marauders, but it has the order the citizens in the embattled regions should surrender any guns that they might possess, including guns that any of their citizens have license to possess. Officials of the federal government have repeatedly advised non-Fulani peoples to save their lives by simply surrendering their land and freedom to the Fulani-led terrorists. Ordinarily, Fulani organizations such as Miati Allah are thus able to threaten even the state government for daring to make laws protecting their citizens against the Fulani terror. The Fulani are constantly threatening that they are prepared to keep this terror campaign going for years, decades, or even centuries, if necessarily, until they have seized all the land of the peoples of Nigeria, until they have subjugated or exterminated the owners of the land. By the early 2021, the Fulani elite of the northwestern Nigeria, obviously surprisingly by the escalating strength of the homeland self-defense that was being demonstrated by the South against the Fulani and their allied terrorists, began to elevate and thereby expose their suspicious support for the Fulani terrorists. While no member of the Fulani elite has ever condemned or even sent to notice the Fulani outrage in the South, many of them began a campaign of condemnation against the southern victims of Fulani terrorism who were defending their homes. Many Fulani elders organizations and the state governors and others have been striving hard to turn the truth upside down and to paint the Southerners and not the Fulani as the destroyers of peace and security in Nigeria. Leaders of the Fulani-led northern organizations even call on the federal government to deploy the army to the southwest for the purpose of defending northerners in the south, and the state governors of the Fulani-led north of Nigeria issued statements claiming that the defensive attacks on the Fulani marauders in the south were destroying the spirit of the peaceful coexist in Nigeria. One governor made the alarming statement that the Fulani herdsmen have been carrying AK-47 rifles because they need such weapons for self-defense, and that herdsmen in deep Ondo State forests are not subject to authority of the Ondo State governor. In this way, the Fulani elite have left no doubt at all about the true root of and source of support for the Fulani invasions of the Middle Belt and the South and the involvement of foreign terrorist groups, ISIS and Al-Qaeda. In the terrorism in Nigeria, because of the universality nature of Yoruba civilization, many Yoruba persons have been hesitant to believe that the Fulani Maridwin has been a planned invasion, but now most of such Yoruba persons are no longer deceived. The Fulani elite have now totally destroyed any basis of confidence or hope that the peoples of Nigeria can ever again coexist peacefully in this same country of Nigeria. As the matter stands today, even though some of the nationalities under attack are bravely putting up various levels of resistance, the combination of the Fulani Maridwas and the international terrorist organizations with various kinds of assistance by the Nigerian federal government agencies and the Fulani political elite, it succeeded considerably in disrupting most part of Nigeria, Middle Belt and South. Thousands of citizens of the Middle Belt ate piling into internal displaced people's camp. Unknown before in Yoruba history, some thousands of Yoruba people violently displaced from their villages and farmland are showing up as refugees in countries beyond Nigeria. The disruptions are thus beginning to spread beyond Nigeria to other countries of West Africa. Fundamentalist terror is beginning its spread from Nigeria across West Africa. In general, the Fulani-controlled federal government concerns itself very little with social economic development or defense of citizens and focuses most of its energy on controlling, coercing, subduing the citizens and the peoples of Nigeria. For instance, its effort to control and subdue the masses of educated youth of Nigeria in the South have been given birth to a grotesque unit of the federal police, the unit known as SARS. The function of SARS has been to keep the masses of educated youth successively peacefully by going after them with unimaginable brutality. SARS operatives commonly stop youth in the street and very roughly or even violently handle them or even kill some. SARS operatives will stop a public bus and order the youth in it to disembark for questioning and searching. Commonly in such encounter, possessions of books or sophisticated telephones or laptop computers is taken as proof that the young man or woman is involved in the criminal activities and has sufficient reason to arrest, beat, or even kill him or her. Especially in the state of the Yoruba Southwest, very many families have horrible stories to tell about the bestialities and murders that their sons and daughters have suffered in the hands of SARS operatives. At last, in October 2020, the youth started peaceful protests aimed at getting the federal government to scrap SARS. The biggest protests occurred in the cosmopolitan Yoruba city of Lagos. These were mostly educated youth, many of them university graduates, and their protest was impressively peaceful and orderly. If, for instance, they generated some trash, when they stopped to eat and drink on the street, they never move on without clearing up the trash. Members of the public were so impressed that many came out to give gifts of food, drinks, even money to protesters. But then on October 20, 2020 evening, as the youthful protesters were sitting in a popular road patch at the Lekki toll gate, waving small Nigerian flags and singing the Nigerian national anthem, soldiers of the Nigerian army suddenly arrived, started to shoot into their midst. How many youths were killed that evening has not been verified. Because the official cover-up has been very strong, the government and the government agencies claim that there were no casualties, but eyewitnesses, international media bodies witnessed at ongoing Lagos State official public inquiry, and parents have been instantly claiming that many corpses from the scene of the shooting were received in certain Lagos hospital that night. That this day is the character of the Nigerian governance. Growing international interventions in the Nigerian situation. From about mid-2019, representatives of the Nigerian Indigenous National Alliance for Self-Determination, NINAS, of which the Yoruba nation is a strong member, began to make serious contact with high-level officials of the United States government in Washington, D.C., as well as the United Nations headquarters in New York. The United Nations, the United States, various other concerned government and agencies of the international community began to take far-reaching steps in response to the increasingly troubling situation in Nigeria. Examples include, number one, in August 2019, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Nigeria, Agnes Clamart, led a visitation to Nigeria to investigate widespread killings, rapes, kidnappings, and extrajudicial killings going on in Nigeria. In September 2019, she wrote in a report that the constitutional arrangement of Nigeria as enshrined in the 1999 Nigerian Constitution were like a pressure cooker for injustice, and Nigeria was now a threat to global security, because should Nigeria of 200 million people unravel due to those pressures, the world would have an unprecedented refugee crisis to manage. The global terror networks, including ISIS and Al-Qaeda, that were already involved in Nigeria, will step more fully into the large swath of ungoverned space that will emerge in Nigeria and might thereby reinvigorate their global terror camp. Number two, following the June-July 2019 International Religious Freedom IRF ministerial roundtables in Washington, D.C., the United States on the 19th of December 2019 placed Nigeria on a special watch list for ethno-religious killing being perpetrated in Nigeria in gross infraction of international religious freedom. Number three, in March 2020, the United States Department listed Nigeria as a country of particular concern, CPC, for the escalation of the ethno-religious killings, and this was followed by the June 2, 2020 executive order on advancing international religious freedom issued under Frank R. Wolf International Religious Freedom Act of 1998, in which Nigeria fall into all the parameters threshold of remedial intervention listed in the executive order. Number four, in a media briefing in 2020 by Major General Dick Van Anderson, reported by the Nigerian newspaper Vanguard of August 5th, Major General Anderson says Lagos and the southern Nigerian coast shall shortly be invaded by the incoming international jihadists, including Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. Number five, in late November 2020, following the Nigerian army shooting of a peaceful protest in Lagos, the international television house CNN launched a special investigation into the shooting and furnished the world with clear and powerful details of the event, including details from satellite pictures. In a more important step, on December 7, 2020, the United States Secretary of State formally designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern for terror, placing Nigeria in the League of State Sponsors of Terror, along with Iran, Afghanistan, and others. Number seven, in the same December 2020, the Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, ICC, Fatah Bensouda, announced that the situation in Nigeria provided by the justification of the ICC investigating Nigeria for crimes against humanity, complicity of government in the activities of Boko Haram, ISWAP, Fulani herdsmen, and other terror networks operating in Nigeria. Number eight, the worsened ethno-religious killings in Nigeria and the mounting evidence of the complicity of the federal government of Nigeria and the security forces prompted a December 2020 public hearing in the United States by Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. Number nine, in the same December 2020, a top commander of the United States Special Operations Command in Africa, Major General Dick Van Anderson, warned that the global terror group Al-Qaeda was making its way into Nigeria through the northwest flank down towards southern Nigeria in an invasion that will link with the ISIS-driven ISWAP Boko Haram terrorism already ravaging Nigeria from the northeast flank of Nigeria. Number 10, in a November 2020 letter to the government of the United Kingdom by the UK House of Lords, the House of Lords recommended investigation into the complicity of the federal government of Nigeria in the widespread killings being carried out by the so-called Fulani herdsmen and other terror networks operating in Nigeria, including Boko Haram. Number 11, on November 24, 2020, a report on the front page of the Nigerian newspaper read, "EndSARS, UK lawmaker slams Buhari regime and demands sanctions." Number 12, in April-May 2021, the United States issued an alert that ISIS and its allies have infested southern Nigeria from the coast. Number 13, in April-May 2021, both the United States and the United Kingdom issued travel advisories to their citizens, advising them to avoid traveling to Nigeria because of the terrible poor security conditions in Nigeria. We Yoruba have now decided to liberate our nation. We Yoruba nation do not want to continue to be partakers in this prolonged and escalating barbarism in Nigeria, or to be partakers in the ultimate and imminent Nigeria catalysm. Over 55 million Yoruba people are product of a very ancient urban civilization, of an outstanding culture that has been imitated, emulated more and more across the world, of the very old tradition of religious tolerance, toleration, harmony, calm, of deeply respected hospitality to all foreign nationals, and of a great ambitions to be part of the modern world and to give mightily to human civilization. Two American researchers, Gerard McLaughlin, Clarence Bouchard, who recently did a study of Nigeria for an agency of the American government, wrote, "The Yoruba serve as a modern example of coexistence, since many Muslims and Christians and animist Yoruba dwell peacefully, not only in the same cities, but also in the same household." A London University scholar, Professor G.D.Y. Peel, at the end of many years of studying Yoruba land in Nigeria, wrote the following memorable statement in 2016 article. "The Yoruba greatly pride themselves on their religious toleration. It is an outlook that has roots in their traditional religion. The tree which has yielded the poisonous fruit that we see in the Boko Haram could never grow in Yoruba soil." He also wrote that the Yoruba people are characterized by an unusually focused push for modern development. Yoruba people want to control their self-determination in order to be able to keep Nigeria's looming horror away from their homeland, and in order to be able to develop in their own way, at their own pace, as a significant part of the modern world, in loyalty to the ancient Yoruba culture of hospitality, help to foreigners, peaceful non-Yoruba Nigerians, Fulani, and all other Ito peaceful residents in our Yoruba land, and are willing to continue so, no matter their nationality, can be sure of our hospitality, protection, even friendship now, and will enjoy the protection of the laws and other assets of the Yoruba nation state, to live their lives, raise their families, and pursue their occupations, businesses. We Yoruba people therefore deserve the understanding and support of the rest of the world in our noble venture of self-determination. In spite of all our devastating experience in Nigeria, we Yoruba nation and the people harbor no malice, no hatred, no bitterness, no grudge against Nigeria or against any Nigerian people. We are taking some civilized and cautious steps just now for protecting our farmland populations against the Fulani destructions of the farms and villages, against killings, raping, and kidnapping. The centerpiece of this state is Amotekun, under which some carefully selected persons have been properly trained and led to contain marijuana crimes in the Yoruba farmland. But we nevertheless preserve our culture of hospitality to foreigners, with the result that large numbers of peaceful, law-abiding, and enterprising persons from other parts of Nigeria are regularly settled in our homeland, are streaming to our homeland, are prospering there, and are sure that the Yorubas host will protect them. Most Yoruba people now strongly desire their Yoruba nation self-determination, autonomy, sovereignty, separate from Nigeria. For us, Yoruba, this is a noble goal, and our nation's guiding philosophy. is that those who seek the noble goal must seek to reach it by the noble path, the path of love, peace among men. Therefore, all of us who are contributing to the striving for the Yoruba nation's noble goal are committed to serving in a way that our Yoruba people truly desire, to achieve change by peacefully means and by respect to the laws of the Nigerian state, the laws, conventions, international community. We are confident that reaching the goal through such peaceful and law-abiding means is achievable by us. We are confident that we, the Yoruba, command the cultural, human, intellectual, professionally, and diplomatic capability to achieve our goal peacefully and lawfully. Needless to say, it is not out of fear that we have chosen the peaceful, law-abiding, and altogether the noble path. It is out of deliberate policy and, and engaged by our Yoruba nation civilization. We are sure that all who know us know that we can creditably, successfully defend ourselves if we are compelled to. What we are saying is that there is no need to compel us, no need to start violence and war over a change that is now obviously inevitable. In utmost sense of responsibility, we Yoruba urge all of the Nigerian various people to be realistic. We believe that all of us should and can seek to be peacefully and be friendly neighbors in all our future, and that we do not have to turn the veils of Niger and Benue into a region of perpetual discord, conflict, wars, or bloodletting, a region of constant worry to the world. We repeat that desire of the peoples of our nation's self-determination, autonomy is not born out of any kind of negative emotions. It is born out of desire to revive our capability and the beauties of our life in a setting of our own to retrieve the democratic essence of our nation, character, and to return to our civilization building orientation and strengthening so that we may lift up our people in the world as we raise in education, economy, science, literature, the art, the science, and the height of technology. We have impart the same strength to our neighbors in all directions and impart real and lasting value to our world. Our desire is totally noble desire. It is a desire worth of support by all persons and peoples of goodwill in the world, and we will serve in the struggle for the Yoruba self-determination as servant of the Yoruba nation. In this historical moment, have committed ourselves to the Yoruba nation's noble struggle towards the Yoruba nation's noble goal. This is an all-Yoruba mass struggle. The Yoruba self-determination struggle is a mass movement of the Yoruba people at home and in the Yoruba homeland in Nigeria, in the Yoruba diaspora in the most countries of the world, and even the non-Nigerian Yoruba homeland in Benin Republic, Togo, although the main movement in Nigeria has needed to tread carefully in Benin and Togo in order not to offend the friendly world power of France. In early 2019, masses of Yoruba people of Benin Republic, including Obas, intellectuals, professionals, politicians, great numbers of common people, assembled in Ajashe, Port Novo, and founded a national organization with the name of Egbe Omo Oduduwa. Some invited Yoruba leaders and Obas from Nigeria were present or sent representatives. Professor Akintoye from Nigeria was the keynote speaker. Since then, Benin Republic Yoruba people have held many popular rallies to demand what they called a return home. In a typical Yoruba fashion, the Yoruba people of Nigeria and the diaspora outside of Africa have founded hundreds of organizations in a short period of time for contributing to the self-determination struggle of formerly existing civil organizations. Many have endorsed joining the self-determination struggle, bringing their wealth of experience to the struggle. When the self-determination movement called for the Yoruba rallies to highlight the Yoruba self-determination demand on Nigerians Independence Day, 1st of October 2020, an estimated 4.2 million Yoruba protested held rallies in Nigeria and in 166 countries across the world. In some countries, the protesters carried through the street earthen pots that were painted in the colors of the Nigerian flag and then gathered at a major city center and ritually smashed the pots to pieces to symbolize the breaking up of Nigeria. In some other countries, the protesters ritually ripped the Nigerian flag. By February 2021, news came that the first generation Yoruba diaspora in America, consisting of descendants and the Yoruba diaspora of the Atlantic slave trade era of the 16th to the 19th century, had stepped into the Yoruba self-determination struggle. From Uruguay, there came an announcement that these Yoruba descendants from 40 countries of the Americas had entered into the Yoruba struggle, ready to support of their Yoruba ancestral homeland in Nigeria. We perceive that the peaceful and the law-abiding path is open. In general, it used to be that any kind of ethnic nationalities activity was regarded as a taboo in Nigeria and was treated as a crime. But that has changed considerably in the recent years because Nigerians are becoming more and more aware of the legitimate right of nationalities in the world, as well as the duties and responsibilities of nationalities to seek to achieve their goals by the peaceful and law-abiding means. Violence is no longer really inevitable or even necessary in the Nigerian situation. Even seeking the separation of one's ethnic nation from Nigeria does not necessarily have to be accompanied by violent riot, armed and violent insurrection, defiance of the law, criminal or terrorist language. The problem is that most Nigerian ethnic nationalities activists are not yet aware that Nigerian situation and the realities themselves, as well as the similar situations in many countries of the world, and the laws of the international community have pushed the Nigerian debate beyond the realm of threat to law and peace, beyond the realms of state authoritarianism and the strong arm measures, and have chartered the insuppressible legitimacy for ethnic nationalities activities and demands for separation from Nigeria. In a book which he wrote and published in 1998, the book titled This Animal Called Man, General Olusegun Obasanjo, the military head of state in the 1970s and later 1999 to 2007, elected the president of Nigeria, suggested that Nigeria to secede and the procedure for the peaceful secession should be clearly stated in the Nigerian constitution, in emulation, according to him, of some clauses that like that in the constitution of Ethiopia. In 1999, a leading Yoruba legal practitioner, lawyer Adedapo Adeniran, wrote a book with the important title Nigeria, The Case for Peaceful and Friendly Dissolution. His book spells out the imperatives for the separation of the various parts of Nigeria peacefully, lawfully, friendly process towards the separation and the incalculable benefit of separating peacefully, lawfully, and in a friendly manner. In an important speech in Lagos in 2002, the veteran Nigerian nationalist Chief Anthony Enhaoro, after reminding Nigerians of General Obasanjo's suggestions of the 1998, went on to make the historical suggestion that in order to restore order and peace to Nigeria, the right of the secession should be enriched in the Nigerian constitution in conformance with the laws and conventions of the United Nations Organization and the African Union. At the United Nations General Assembly in New York in 2016, President Buhari was asked about the agitations of many Igbos, Nigerians, for the separate Biafra country. He answered that if agitators wanted to be taken seriously, they should establish a law-abiding organization to promote their demands peacefully, and that if they did that, Nigerian state would have to listen to them and talk to them. Internationally, President Buhari was understood to mean that asking for Biafra was not illegal in itself, but as long as the agitators of Biafra continued to go on violent street demonstrations, confrontations with the law enforcement agencies, and the defiance of the Nigerian state and its laws, Nigeria will have no other option than to send law enforcement agency to control them. But if that will adopt peaceful political means, then Nigeria will respond to them by discussion and negotiation. In short, President Buhari stated the laws as spelled out in the resolutions, declaration, conventions, and constitution of the United Nations Organization, the African Union, and the rest of the international community. Those laws and conventions are an open door for all ethnic nationalists today in the world. They are part of the laws of Nigeria because Nigeria is a signatory to them. Professor Angola Abdullahi, former Vice Chancellor of Ahmadu Bello University, speaking for the Northern Elder Forums in a public interview in May 2017, made the following important statement. If Nigerians are tired of staying together, they should be prepared to accept division instead of remaining in agony and in disappointment with one another. Every Nigerian should be able to speak his opinion about the state of the country concerning the specific agitation for Biafra by young citizens named Nnamdi Kanu. Professor Abdullahi said, the issue of the Biafra is all part of the discussion of restructuring Nigeria. Yes, if Biafra means negotiation, yes, it is all a matter of discussion. If it means Igbo wants to have a country of their own separate from Nigeria, it is a matter of discussion. We are prepared for the discussion. Then he added, the following crucial point about people should handle ethnic nationalist demand. If it is discovered that the law of the country is violated, that somebody has gone beyond his fundamental right, the law is very clear on this. What Wahab's government is concerned about is that violence was part of Kanu's agitation to realize his dream by force. I think that is what government is trying to tackle, to my understanding. So if Kanu is talking about Biafra, he is free to talk about Biafra, and everybody is free to talk about his understanding of Nigerian state. We are always talking that the Nigerian state is not working. How can we make it to work? Question mark. If the best option is to call for separate countries, why not? Question mark. Alhaji Mohammed Mahadi Shehu, the chairman of the Dialogue Group Kaduna, made a strong plea in the late August 2020 for the breaking up of Nigeria into smaller countries and in an orderly and peaceful manner. He expressed the view that the 1914 amalgamation was done out of mischiefs without taking into consideration the peculiarities in Nigeria, that it was a bad mistake, and that since independence in 1960, Nigeria has stumbled through one form of calamity or tragedy or other. He added, let us peacefully go on negotiation table, break the collar, distribute the country for everybody's peace. If we do not do it now, the future generation will abuse us. He further added, it is better for Nigeria to break into smaller countries as much as possible to save properties, lives, relationships, prosperity, because as things stand and are developing today, no angel can ever unite Nigeria. Furthermore, we operate by the provision of international and Nigerian law. In the background to all the above writings and statements, there are the various international declarations, laws, conventions asserting self-determination as an inalienable right of every nationality in the world. These include the United Nations Charter of 1945, the United Nations Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, ICCPR, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, ICESCR, the United Nations Declaration of the Right of the Indigenous People, 2007, the African Union Convention on Human and People's Rights. These laws and conventions assert that every indigenous nation has the inalienable right to self-determination, the right to determine their political status, to develop their cultures and their economy, social well-being in their own way and under government of their own choosing. These laws also assert the duty of every state or country not only to recognize but to protect this right. They lay it down that a nationality seeking to assert its self-determination does not need to seek permission from anybody. may not be imposed upon by the country to which it currently belongs, may not have its citizens denied their civic right, may not have its territory occupied militarily without its express consent. These laws and conventions also say that seeking self-determination does not entitle any people to foment violence or insurrection in any country. All these declarations, laws, and conventions, we repeat, are part of the laws of Nigeria because Nigeria is a signatory to them all. Thus, the path to peaceful ethnic nationalist activities, to a peaceful demand for separation from any country, including Nigeria, are lawfully and legally open. It is an ideal whose time has come in the world, but unfortunately, many Nigerian ethnic nationalist activists are still not aware of this and still prefer violent street riot confrontation with the law enforcement agency and incendiarily and terroristic threat. Instead of all this, the peaceful road is open and available. And we also take serious note of the wisdom of the most former rulers of Nigeria. Very importantly, most of the foremost Nigerian leaders have served in the highest and the most important positions in the affairs of Nigeria, have offered a particular piece of wisdom about the realities of Nigeria. They said wisdom, in summary, is that the Nigerian unity, which some of us like to claim does not exist and even can never exist. Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, a simple old teacher who served as the first Premier Minister of Nigerian Federation from 1959 to 1966, made the statement repeatedly that Nigerian unity does not exist and there is no basis for it. In one of his most reported public statements on the subject, he said as follows: since 1914, the British government has been trying to make Nigeria into one country, but the Nigerian peoples themselves are historically different in their backgrounds, in their religious beliefs and customs, and do not show themselves any willingness to unite. Nigeria unity is only a British intention for the country. The topmost leader of the northern region between 1949 and 1966, Sir Ahmadu Bello, described the 1914 amalgamation as the mistake of 1914. In a contribution to the debate in the Nigerian parliament in 1953, he said, "The mistake of the 1914 has come to light. I should like it to go no further." In one of the Nigerian constitutional meetings in London in the late 1950s, when Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Premier of the Eastern region, advised, "Let us forget our differences," Sir Ahmadu Bello responds, "No, we cannot forget our differences. We must respect our differences." Sir Ahmadu Bello, fearful of domination by more educated peoples of the South in those years, was vehemently bent on a very large measures of regional autonomy. But after the British had maneuvered to make its Fulani group the dominant group in the Nigerian federal government at independence in 1960, he felt that he had found a Fulani solution to Nigeria's extreme lack of unity. He thought that the solution was to impose a rigged and perpetual Fulani dictatorship over Nigeria. So on October 12, 1960, 11 days after the celebration of independence, it was reportedly by a local newspaper, The Parrot, to have the celebration of independence. It was reported by the local newspaper, The Parrot, to have said, "The new nation called Nigeria should be an extension of the estate of our great-grandfather, Otom Dan Fodio. We must ruthlessly prevent a change of power. We must use the minorities of the North as a willing tools and the South as a conquered territory, and never let them rule over us, never allow them to control their own future." It was saying in essence that it was impossible for Nigerian peoples on their own to unite, but that the Fulani have been vested with federal power by the British independence should pursue a ruthless agenda of suppression of the non-Fulani people in order to keep Nigeria united as one country. But the truth is that in spite of Fulani ruthlessness, impunity, and terrorism, Nigeria's unity does not exist and cannot exist. In fact, The terroristic rampage of the Fulani today are making it abundantly clear that to keep Nigeria together as one country is to keep prolonging in the Nigerian space the scenario of escalating violence, insecurity, terrorism, ethnic cleansing, poverty, deprivation, retrogression of civilization, and abysmal human suffering. General Yakubu Gowon, as the military head of state following the military coup of July 1966, made the following very deep statement. Suffice it to say, putting all consideration to test, politically, economically, as well as social, the basis of for Nigerian unity is not there. General Olusegun Obasanjo was the military head of state in 1975 to 1979, as will be remembered in 1998 as the process of extreme centralization, dictatorship, state terror pushed Nigeria towards disintegration. Obasanjo offered a proposal that the Nigerian constitution should include a clause allowing any people of Nigeria to secede and providing for a peaceful step to secession. The Fulani president of Nigeria since 2015, Muhammadu Buhari, is fond of saying that Nigeria's unity is not negotiable. What it manifestly means is that the Fulani kind of unity that was proposed or predicted by Sir Ahmadu Bello 11 days after independence, unity imposed by the Fulani through the use of the Nigerian federal power, resulting in the Fulani subjugation of the other peoples of Nigeria, has been more or less achieved, and that the outcome is not negotiable. However, former President Obasanjo has responded to Buhari that what is happening is not unity of Nigeria, but Fulanization of Nigeria, and that civil war or a violent breaking up of Nigeria is imminent. And we take serious note of the increasing dark assentment of Nigeria by international community. In the international community, Nigeria is currently widely assessed to be in its worst condition ever. In terms of its governance, its economy, its security, the mood of its many peoples, its chances of continuing to exist as one country. A 2011 case study of Nigeria for the United States policymakers concluded that even if Nigeria were to put forth its best effort, Nigeria has long-term struggle ahead to remain a viable state. A United Nations Common Country Analysis, CCA, of Nigeria paints a very gloomy picture. It described Nigeria as a divided society on the basis of plurality of ethnic, religious, and regional identities that are tended to define the country's political existence. It added that for decades, different peoples in Nigeria had different times expressed feelings of being marginalized or being shortchanged, dominated, oppressed, threatening, or even targeted for extermination. That most of the Nigerian Development Index and some social indices were performing as such at much below acceptable levels, and that Nigeria was suffering serious constraint of slow economic growth, slow social development, lack of good governance. It summed up that Nigeria was one of the poorest, most unequal countries in the world, with 80 million or 64% of our population living below poverty line. In early 2018, an international agency that monitors extreme poverty trends in the world classified Nigeria as the #1 of home of extreme poverty in the world. At the same time, various informed observers were warning that if Nigeria continues in its current mode and continue to decline at its current pace, nearly 50% of the world's poorest people by 2050 will be Nigerians. In December 2020, the World Bank projected that the number of Nigerians living in poverty will soon top up 100 million. By the early 2019, a major economic and business research body published by the frightening information that Nigeria was already expanding 69% of its gross national product to service debt, and predicted that the percentage will reach 83% by 2023. Even so, Nigeria's government continued to seek and take more and more loans around the world because it must borrow to keep its basic functions running. A United Nations router who visited officially in 2019 reported that the 1999 Constitution was a pressure cooker for the injustice, diversion, conflict, and insecurity. Nigeria constantly flooded the International Criminal Court, ICC, with petitions, complaints, and allegations of serious human rights abuses, crimes against humanity. In 2020, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court announced that there were sound basis for investigations of crimes against humanity in the situation in Nigeria. Human rights abuses, war crimes, extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearance of people, conscription of underage children into unofficial military services, investigation that could result in serious crime charges against many highly placed Nigerian public officials. Amnesty International applauded this announcement and added that the killings of tens of youth during the peaceful protests against SARS in Lagos be also investigated by the ICC. In the mid-2020, the United States blacklisted Nigeria as a country of serious concern for violations of religious freedom. In the last month of the year, the United States Senate held a public hearings over the troubling report of attacks on religious freedom and widespread killings and terrorism in Nigeria. Even in the United Kingdom, the country had created and has always supported the Fulani rulers of Nigeria. The terrible report of violence and insecurity in Nigeria at the last moved the British Parliament to hold debate, express serious concerns and condemnations about the Nigerian situation worldwide. Many are expressing doubt whether a country that has dragged itself as far down as Nigeria has done can ever pick itself back up again to continue as one country. Finally, we take note that many other Nigerian peoples are now seeking to quit Nigeria. Countless significant voices from the south, the middle belt of Nigeria, are now saying that they want their various people to separate from Nigeria. The Igbo people of Nigerian southeast have historically been the first in this, with their decades-old demand for their separate country of Biafra. Leading citizens of the Nigerian South-South are now demanding Niger Delta Federation of their own. We Yoruba people of the Nigerian Southwest are demanding our own Yoruba Republic or simply Yoruba land. And many important voices from the Middle Belt are demanding a Takuruku Federation for the people of the Middle Belt. Thus, altogether, people who constitute fully 75% of the population of Nigeria are demanding separation from Nigeria. Many well-informed Nigerians are boldly speaking up to say that dissolution of Nigeria is needed or inevitable and imminent. Therefore, we Yoruba chooses the peaceful, law-abiding path to assert our self-determination and sovereign status out of Nigeria. We Yoruba lead in the choice of the peaceful, law-abiding path of our goal of a separate country of our own. We, the servant of the Yoruba nation in this struggle, faithfully operate. We always faithfully operate with method of peaceful organization, peaceful demand, peaceful propaganda, peaceful protest, peaceful legal action, peaceful political persuasion, peaceful negotiation. We will push for negotiation tables and never push for street brawls or any kind of conflict. If we find among our people any nationalist activist person or group that is inclining towards violence, we will encourage them to turn instead to peaceful and law-abiding means. After careful studies of the record of the separate movement in our world, we are persuaded that a peaceful approach is more likely to succeed. Various nationalist agitations in the various countries of the world in the course of the past century employ violent means at various times while striving to achieve their nationalist goals. Yoruba groups engaged in serving the Yoruba nation need to note carefully that none of these use of violent or terrorist method achieve their purpose of self-determination or autonomy for their nations. All they succeeded in doing was to generate confrontations and wars with governments of their country. Young nationalist agitators, being young, are naturally attracted to tough, rough activism from only proudly proclaim the virtues of their own nations. Youthful nationalist activists commonly tend to lapse into insulting other nations, into needless bragging and boasting, into daring or challenging other nations, or even into daring and challenging their country and its government. All of these actions tend to provoke avoidable conflict, hostile governmental actions, and even wars. Our Yoruba youth must learn the truth that the use of rough and violent means does not usefully confer success, and indeed, that it is usually more likely to prevent success. Emulating the kind of peaceful process employed by the nationalist movement that have achieved various grades of success in our times. The Scotland, the Welsh, the French Canadians, the Czechs, the Slovakia, Timor-Leste, and others, our various Yoruba self-determination groups and organizations must operate peacefully altogether. We Yoruba must demonstrate our Yoruba nation civilization and maturity while the resolute and irrepressibly pushing our way forward to the great goal of the Yoruba strength, self-determination, self-fulfillment, and prosperity. Moreover, we Yoruba nation will be concerned not only about our own nation's well-being and future, but also about the well-being and future of the other people with whom we have been co-citizens in the same country of Nigeria for over a century. We will always bear in mind that these non-Yoruba peoples will be the neighbors of the Yoruba nation in all the future. We shall therefore seriously seek to ensure that these neighbors will be friendly and not hostile neighbors, neighbors whom can help and who can help us. Furthermore, we repeat that in the faithfulness of our ancient tradition of hospitality to the foreigners and strangers in our land, we sincerely assure all non-Yoruba persons who have been living or doing businesses peacefully in our land, homeland, that in our sovereign country, they'll be able to continue to do so peacefully and productively under our country's laws, and that others who choose to come will equally enjoy the benefit of our laws. Indeed, we know that there will be a rush of investors to our country, largely from our Yoruba diaspora from all over the world, partly from the other source. We expect that investors from our immediate neighbors will be many amongst. We Yoruba acknowledge in our trying to walk our choosing peaceful path. We have problem arising from the fact that the Fulani and other terrorists are ravaging our homeland, creating terror camps in our forest, killing thousands of our people, forcing many of our farmers to abandon farming altogether, raping our women, kidnapping our people, extorting ransom from our families. We therefore compel to defend our homeland. At first, our state government created a local defense agency named Amotekun to deal with this crisis in an officially managed manner, but the federal resistance to it has robbed it of effectiveness. Consequently, small volunteer local teams of our youth have risen to task and has tended to create the impression that our self-determination struggle is employing some violence. Since the self-determination struggle belongs predominantly among our youth, however, effort by our self-determination movement to assert a difference between the self-determination struggle per se and the local self-defense initiatives are going on at the time, as sincerely as people of goodwill can easily see and testify to. In some of these choose to hold public protest or rally in our homeland in Nigeria, they must do it in a peaceful, law-abiding manner. We must never treat police personnel as enemies. They are not our enemies. This is the manifest which of our Yoruba nation. The right of peaceful protest and rally is everybody's right under international laws and the laws of all countries. It is good to hold rallies to spread the message, but we must never allow our rallies to result in rowdiness, conflict, confrontations with the police, obstructions to our sophisticated struggle, or distractions from our central message. Our Yoruba nation is powerful. It commands the intellectual, cultural, diplomatic, professional, technologically, and other capability to achieve its purpose without violence and without any messy confrontations with the Nigerian law enforcement authority. As for the Yoruba in the diaspora, they must frequently hold big rallies to bring the unbearable conditions in which Yoruba people live in Nigeria to the attention of the wide world to seek support for the quest of the Yoruba nation for a separate country of its own. Thank God for giving us the social media. At this time, it helps to spread the Yoruba message very widely and powerfully. But let us henceforth sanitize our social media communications. We must desist from insulting or threatening anybody, from speaking terroristic or indecent language. We must desist from denigrating or threatening any of our own people. We must desist from threatening the government of Nigeria. Our self-determination message is so big, so compelling, so noble, that there is no room in it for insult or threat or incendiary or terroristic statement. What we need to spell out the message constantly, unrelentingly, until the whole world becomes saturated with it. Who are we? Yoruba? Question mark. To what height did we rise in the history before we dragooned into Nigeria? Question mark. How have we been brutalized by being part of Nigeria? Question mark. How are we facing total destruction in Nigeria? Question mark. How are we peacefully, lawfully, decently fighting for our exit from Nigeria? What our Odua country will be soon, a land of order, opportunity, enterprise, sanity, prosperity, greatness, a strong factor for peace and harmony in the world. What our Odua in the world, etc., etc., etc. These our message. Let us publicize them might and name, day and night. That is the way to enhance our chances of success. Finally, all Yoruba persons working for the Yoruba nation must always dutifully bear in mind that they are the beginning, the journey of reviving and rebuilding their Yoruba nation, presenting it to the world, for it really is a nation and people blessed with orderly group life, dedicated to respect for human life, for human freedom, human dignity, a powerfully motivated to build advanced civilization. We need a lot of courage. Operating with this principle and this high sense of duty, we Yoruba must exhibit the highest level of courage and bravery in making known and pursuing our quest, the quest for Yoruba revival, retrieval, self-determination, autonomy, prosperity. Yoruba organizations, groups, individuals who accept and support this quest have the duty to raise their voices and speak up fearlessly. Obviously, while every Yoruba civic organization will pursue its other agenda, all organizations and persons who subscribe who subscribe to the who subscribe to the idea who subscribe to the idea of self-determination for the Yoruba nation should always find ways to collaborate, meet periodically together, and decide together how to strengthen the delivery of the Yoruba self-determination message and how to make the struggle to finally victory. Ilana Omodua, which is already an umbrella organization of over 200 affiliated civic organizations at home and in diaspora, obviously has a major duty to encourage and promote the cooperation and collaboration of all the organizations seeking self-determination for the Yoruba nation. Our Yoruba cause is just a noble cause. We ask our people to have the courage to embrace it peacefully. We need to hurry to attain self-determination. We must not wait until the masses of our people, especially our youth, become so desperate as to break into violence. And we need the most imaginative diplomacy in Nigeria. In Nigeria, we must be respectfully aware of the growing desire for self-determination among various nations. We must establish relations with similar peaceful
self-determination organizations of other Nigerian nationalities, especially with nationalities with experience and desire that are similar to ours, in the hope that having many nationalities working together in the same peaceful spirit will promote the peaceful and law-abiding approach that we have chosen. We enhance our chances of ultimate peaceful victory. The awful and worsened Nigerian conditions are breeding and strengthening the spirit of self-determination in more and more nations, especially in the south and the middle belt of Nigeria. Our struggle for sovereignty of the Yoruba nation must find respectful ways to seek hard, strengthening, thorough collaborations or alliance with the other nations' struggles. It is important to report here that we, Yoruba, have achieved more significant steps in the fostering close relations with the nations of the Nigerian South and the Middle Belt in 2016-17. Our nation's oldest organization, Afenifere, and the Igbo top leadership in Ohanaeze Indigo embarked upon a close relation and ultimately put together a very important ceremony, handshake across the Niger, aimed at ending decades-old animosities which Nigeria had bred between the Yoruba and the Igbo nations. That success immediately generated widespread interest among the peoples of the South, the Middle Belt, and soon produced a very prestigious inter-regional organization known as the Southern and the Middle Belt Leaders Forum, a body of elder statesmen that has continued to be very virile and respectable in Nigeria affairs. Then in the course of the 2020s, some mostly young self-determination activists with Ilana Omodua acting on the Yoruba side created the proactive organization known as the Nigerian Indigenous Alliance for Self-Determination, NINAS, on behalf of the indigenous people of the South and Middle Belt, all of whom are railing under the Fulani Marauding and terrorism. NINAS has proclaimed a constitutional dispute with the Nigeria uh, dispute. NINAS, as on behalf of the indigenous people of all whom are relying under the Fulani Marauding and terrorism, NINAS has proclaimed a constitutional dispute with the Nigerian state with the constitutional force majeure, which rejects the 1999 Nigerian constitution as a fraud, offers the Nigerian state a 90-day period to take steps to negotiate with the injured nations an unacceptable path forward for Nigeria. This thoughtfully and responsible legal instrument has been filed with the United Nations, with the Nigerian federal government, with the government of the United States, United Kingdom, France, Germany, Canada, Russia, China, Japan. These steps taken in the mid-December 2020 has put powerful note of urgency on the resolution of the disastrous Nigerian situation and is a remarkable step in the promotion of peaceful advance towards definitive change. We also need the most imaginative diplomacy in the world. We also need to devise countless ways to reach, inform, persuade the wide world. For this purpose, it is crucially important that the Yoruba diaspora in each country should guide our effort in their country of residence. In each country, the questions are, whom are we? Reach for the best effect. How do we reach them? Are there any Yoruba persons who are close to these important persons and institutions or have special access to them? Are there any important persons or groups who exhibit some sympathy for the Yoruba nation or nation struggling for liberation? Question mark. Moreover, how do we work for sympathy for our cause in such important bodies as United Nations, European Union, African Union, such as important countries as United States, Canada, UK, China, Israel, France, Germany, Japan? Question mark. How do we move the civilized world to action in the face of relentless effort to destroy democracy, religious freedom, and ethnic and cultural diversity in Nigeria, in the face of the vicious ethnic cleansing and even attempt at genocide in the face of concentration of terrorism that threatening to expand from Nigeria to engulf all of the West Africa, all of which are being supported and aided by the federal government of Nigeria? Question mark. We have obtained our Yoruba nation, the membership of the UNPO. We have thereby taken a very significant step forward, a step that opens for our Yoruba nation very important support and help in our quest for self-determination. We must now go on and use the support available through UNPO to pursue the further steps to our nation's ultimate success and victory. In the special case of the United Kingdom, we need to design a very special ways and means. It is true that the official Britain was generally apathetic to our Yoruba nation in the colonial Nigeria, and that it still tends to support the Fulani control of Nigeria. The original reasons was that the British colonial officials fear that the Yoruba, being much more educated from the beginning than other Nigerian and African nationalities, could wield influence that could halt the British colonial and the post-colonial interest in Nigeria. But in our present struggle, we must exploit other and positive realities and possibilities. For instance, in the Britain and Canada, plus even in the Yoruba homeland in Nigeria, there are many as 8 millions of Yoruba people who were born as British citizens or who have other ways acquired British citizenship. Yoruba people who travel in the world on the British passport that makes Britain very close to the Yoruba nation in the world. How do we take advantage of the special position of these millions and this closeness? Question mark. What are the possibilities for both sides and the advantage for the UK of a Yoruba nation state that is naturally close to the UK that grows prosperously and powerful in the world? Question mark. How do we take advantage of the sympathies of some British churchmen, intellectuals, politicians who admire the character qualities of our Yoruba nation? Question mark. How Yoruba people who are resident in Britain and Canada, especially those who are resident in the countries, have a big task of maturity, guiding and leading us in this matter. Important note, as we go seeking help in the wide world for our self-determination struggle, we Yoruba must never make a mistake of letting our nations appear as a weak nation begging on its knees. We are a strong nation, and that is the image we must resolutely put forward. We were a strong nation long before the British colonialism. We abundantly demonstrate our strength as a strong nation in a decade before the Nigerian independence, when a small independent nation under the British, we grew our western region of Nigeria to become the best governed. And we're almost there. Most progressive, most educated, most modernized, most social economy developed, most industrialized with the best civil service, the best political leadership, the best agricultural and export economy in the colonial Africa. And since Nigeria's independence, in spite of the inevitable impact on us of the perpetual decline and retrogression of Nigeria, the mostly incompetent and ignorant governance, the crookedness, impunity, corruption, the constant ethnic and religious conflict among many of the Nigerian ethnic nationalities, we Yoruba remain far above the religious inter-ethnic conflict. We remain the leaders of the Nigerian economy. Though we only have 25% of Nigeria's population, we command 85% of Nigerian industry capacity and production, over 65% of Nigerians' professional class, over 60% of Nigerian commerce. Whichever nations help our self-determination struggle today will soon benefit seriously from relations with our sovereign country. We do not beg on our knees for help. We seek future partners in progress and prosperity. We need to respect and persuade all shades of opinion in our own nation because we are Yoruba and because our Yoruba culture respects differences of opinion. We must respect even those Yoruba who think that regardless of our the conditions of Nigeria, maybe now or may become later, our Yoruba nation should continue to be part of Nigeria. We speak for all Yoruba people at home and abroad who support Yoruba self-determination, freedom, good governance, security, prosperity in the sovereign country of our own. But we must speak to the all Yoruba people and listen to them in a respectful and brotherly manner. In short, we respectfully urge the debate amongst Yoruba people to conduct with a sense of responsibility, with mature brotherly respect among us. It is now time to forgive an offense and animosity that many linger from the past. It is time to dare to take hold of the brotherness, courage, and hope. Let each person or group enjoy freedom and safety to voice their opinion in this debate. Let us courageously, persistently persuade our people. Ultimately, we will find some ways to conclude the debate with some mechanism to ascertain the majority opinion on this historical matter, perhaps through a referendum or a scientific conducted opinion poll, the kind of noiseless and highly respectable opinion poll that the Scots have been doing in Scotland. We need to remember with all respect that until the end of the 2019, all of us Yoruba patriots were demanding a restructuring of Nigeria as to return Nigeria to the true federal structure, most of us have now given up on restructuring and move on to demand for Yoruba self-determination, our separate country of Yoruba land out of Nigeria. Our reasons are clear. First, it would be foolish for us to take the Fulani depredations and threats lightly. They are threatening that they will drag all of Nigeria through decades or even centuries of the present destructive terrorism. Even if we manage to get Nigeria restructured, there will still be the citizens of Nigeria, which will be long, and they will have constitutional right to bring their terrorism to our own land. We simply cannot afford that any longer. Secondly, it is now clear to us that terrorism or not terrorism, the Fulani are obviously a pre-modern people who generally, psychologically, is the mostly anti-modern and who are intent to put all other peoples of Nigeria to the Fulani level. In sharp contrast, we Yoruba are the foremost civilization building nation in Africa, in Black Africa. Being part of Nigeria has pulled us back. We need to free ourselves and return to the path of progress and modernization. We need to do this not just because of ourselves and our children. We need to do it for the whole of the Black race. Understandably, some of the captains of the Yoruba nation are still hamping on restructuring. We must not denigrate or alienate them. We must respect them and continue to do our best to show them the obviously right path forward today. That is a reasonable approach. Very importantly, too, we will work for Yoruba self-determination, must carefully consider our attitude and approach to the Yoruba men and women who will engage in Nigeria politics and governance. Naturally, we expect every Yoruba person to support our nation's self-defense against terrorism and our nation's struggle for self-determination. But even if our politicians choose not to raise a finger to help, we must not diverse rational ways to approach them. We must diverse national way to approach them. We must not forget certain realities. One is that as long as the Yoruba nation remains part of Nigeria, we must have some Yoruba men and women in the politics and governance of Nigeria. Therefore, our brethren, we are aspiring to achieve elevation through Nigerian politics and not doing anything wrong or irreversibly. It is as we must let it become clearer and clearer to them that 2023 general election will never happen in our Yoruba land, that our Yoruba land will be a separate country before then. If we handle the situation rationally, competently, some of these men and women might turn around to find ways to help the Yoruba struggle, particularly might find ways to use their powerful and influence to help protect our Yoruba people and even to help our Yoruba self-determination struggle. But even if some never change at all, we must never forget that they are still our people. We must never lose hope that they can change someday. Moreover, nearly such youth also fully support the massive demand of Yoruba youth for separate Yoruba country of their own. Therefore, we must manage this importantly, reality carefully. In short, we need to be thoughtfully, carefully in our approach to our politicians. Success of the self-determination struggle and stability and prosperity in our common sovereign country demand it. In summary, we must use our immense support by the masses of our people in the approach to our politicians so as to be effective pressure on them. The great 19th century Australian statesman, Prince Martinich, said that a statesman goal must be as fixed as a star, but that is the path to the star may have to be as a wind as the path of comet. We who lead the struggle for the Yoruba self-determination must strive to be a statesman. We must always be keenly aware of emerging possibility, opportunity for advancing the struggle. We must be intelligently ready to take advantage of them. There is also particularly important consideration concerning our state governors. It is that we, in the self-determination struggle, must demonstrate serious understanding of the condition and limitation in which our state governors are operating in today's Nigeria. From the nature of things, we are not likely to get any of our state governors to give open support to our agitation for Yoruba self-determination, but we must never be hostile to them. On the contrary, we must adroitly explore all the possibilities in our contact with them. We're just about 5 more pages left. one is almost, battery is almost dead. Let's quickly push it. Moreover, just now, as these words have been written, we have a serious problem that we must address with urgency and caring. Most of our educated youth are very intensely angry with and incensed against most of our leading politicians, our elected appointed public office holders, and our former elected and appointed public office holders, and even the generality of the Yoruba elite. The youth feel neglected, abandoned, even dispersed by those who have acquired various kinds of success in life through benefiting from the asset of the modern Yoruba society, from free education, from higher education, scholarship, from professional and entrepreneurial success, from political support by the Yoruba people, etc. It is very dangerous to continue to ignore these mounting youth feelings of anger. According to some official estimate, young people between the age of 18 and 50 constitute over 78% of the Yoruba population in Nigeria, an enormous power that, if unleashed in anger, can devastate our whole society. Some first taste of the power of the smothering and vengeful anger among our youth showed up briefly recently in the destructive outbursts that followed the soldier shooting of the EndSARS peaceful protest in Lagos. Unknown to most Yoruba leaders, many informed people have been warning for years that a massive and terrible destructive youth revolt could happen in Yoruba land. We are striving for the Yoruba self-determination now have the duty to take very incisive and careful steps to preempt such a disaster. The act of the Yoruba self-determination struggle is making a great progress, is reviving hope among our youth, but we need to evolve much closer contact with our nation's most successful professionals, business captains, and leading public officials in order to expose them to the frank truth of our nation's condition today, in order to make the best counsel available to them. And more importantly, we need to be particularly and carefully respectful of the angry masses of our youth. We need to engage in effort to improve the opportunity right now. Happily, some of our self-determination organizations, for instance, Ilana Modua, have started to engage serious youth development, empowerment, training others. We must encourage more and more of our self-determination organizations to do the same. But the very problematic are some Yoruba intellectuals and professionals who have various kinds of personal reasons and incentive for defending Nigeria and who tend to manipulate and doctor facts for the purpose. Some members of the Yoruba elite, intelligentsia, while never speaking up against the Fulani killing, brutalities, throat cuttings, rapes, kidnaps, destructions of Yoruba farms and other means of livelihood, while never speaking against the obvious Fulani attempt to seize the Yoruba land and subdue the Yoruba owners of the land, hardly ever miss a chance to claim that the Yoruba persons trying to resist the Fulani outrage are engaged in ethnic profiling against the Fulani and abusing the human rights of the Fulani. In fact, at the point in the recent times, some of these Yoruba intellectuals and professionals claim that it was the Yoruba youth and not the Fulani marauders that were committing the kidnaps in the Yoruba land, simply because a couple of the persons arrested for kidnapping the area of the Yoruba were found to be Yoruba. In making their claims, these members of the Yoruba elite conveniently fret ignorance of the universal fact of human history, that the fact that when a country is experiencing invasion, universal fact of human history, the fact that when a country is experiencing an invasion, homeborn criminal elements in that country tend up their criminalities under the cover of the invasion. Some among our elite choose to play down the massive part of kidnapping being perpetrated by the terrorists. That's one in number 30. We just about a few more to go. All right, let me see. Extradited the act of kidnaps that were traceable to some homegrown Yoruba criminals. In fact, from among these pro-Nigeria Yoruba intellectuals and professionals, some have been sending messages to the international community to say that the Yoruba claims of killing, destruction, raping, and kidnapping Yoruba land in Nigeria are mere fabrications. That it should not believe that the Yoruba people are comfortable in Nigeria, and the high level of Yoruba influence in Nigeria is proved by the fact that the Yoruba man is the vice president of Nigeria. Though these postures by some Yoruba intellectuals and professionals can be infuriating, yet we are committed to peaceful process towards Yoruba self-determination must resolve to handle the situation rationally, carefully. In any case, the pro-Nigerian gurus are very few and growing fewer, while the large majority of Yoruba people who desire self-determination for the Yoruba nation are steadily getting larger and larger in number at home and in the diaspora concerning the effort of the pro-Nigeria element to misinform the international community. They have no chance of succeeding because this information about the Yoruba experience in Nigeria are so massive and have been constantly available to influential persons and agencies in the international community. Also, very importantly, we must uphold and even seriously elevate our respect for our traditional rulers. Our Obas represent the peak of our traditional political civilization. They are the direct descendants of the great kings who have ruled and guided our Yoruba nation for over 1,000 years. As we pursue our self-determination struggle with peace and diplomacy, our Obas are naturally our most dignified ambassador. We must suppress the current tendency by some of our youth. Feel free to denounce and castigate our Obas in the social media. Even if any of our Obas happen to stumble into saying or doing something that we consider to be injurious to our self-determination struggle or our resistance to the Fulani threat, we must be respectful as we discuss with such an Oba. We must also respectfully find ways to make our Obas cease ventilating their disagreement and rivalries in the public. At all costs, we must prevent our Obas from being broken into hostile camps. We must let our Obas enjoy a new surge of honor among us. We must let them be assured that in our own sovereign country, a much higher status and higher dignity await our Obas. We must show gratitude as more and more of our Obas are standing up to support the defense of our homeland against Fulani rampage. As some of them died to speak up for the nation's self-determination, in short, we must recognize that we need significant input from our Obas if we are to succeed in our quest for our nation's self-determination. Again, very importantly, we must diligently make effort to take our quest and explain our actions to and respectfully seek the support of the spiritual leaders of our nations, all the categories of the spiritual leaders of the religions, Muslim, Christians, and all indigenous religion or Isheshe. This is crucial for the success of our struggle. We must be careful at all times and in all things that to ensure our self-determination struggle is the possession of all of us, Yoruba people of all religious persuasions. We must not allow any doubt or argument about the important matter to creep into our affairs. We, Yoruba nation, have the reputation of being the best managers of the religious diversity in the world. We must now show it seamlessly and even beautiful in our self-determination struggle. Also, we must demonstrate in all things that the Yoruba family in Nigeria does not end with the Yoruba nation of Nigerian Southwest, but includes our Yoruba people in Kwara, Kogi State, and our Ishekiri Yoruba people in Delta State. Our many self-determination organizations must now collaborate in the initial phase of our Yoruba self-determination struggle. We Yoruba people, especially our Yoruba youth, must rush to create very many organizations dedicated to the goal of Yoruba self-determination. Every group that did this did it because of their passionate love for the Yoruba nation. Not unnaturally, but unfortunately, the existence of these hundreds of organizations resulted in sometimes unawesome rivalries and create the impression that we Yoruba are disunited and incapable of organizing ourselves properly for the struggle that we are strongly believing. In short, the existence of this organization, rather than demonstrating our nation's strengthening, has tended to appear like indications of our nation's weakness. In spite of this near chaos, we have succeeded in various directions in the struggle, but we obviously cannot and should not continue in the near chaos. From our knowledge of our culture, we know that trying to dissolve our hundreds of organizations in order to fuse them into only one organization cannot work. The wiser approach is to sustain every one of our organizations and then work out a structure of collaboration and strengthening among them. We must impart strength and confidence to each of our organizations and thereby strengthen our whole self-determination struggle. We must not let the world get in the impression that the existence of so many organizations is a sign of our nation's weakness. We must convert it to our nation's strength. The first step has to be that we must cautiously kill the spirit of hostile rivalry among our organizations and replace it with the spirit of brotherness and brotherhood, brotherly support and encouragement. We must constantly remind ourselves that while each organization may be pursuing its agenda, the self-determination struggle in its own way, we are striving for the same goal, the goal of Yoruba self-determination, freedom, and prosperity. It is therefore of utmost importance that any of us would develop or acquire the habit of denigrating the contributions of any organizations or person in this struggle, and those who have been engaging in the undercutting any organization or person now honorably give up those unfortunate habits, because such habit ought the Yoruba struggle ultimately and the strengthening of the Yorubas. Therefore, to collaborate over the self-determination struggle, we must establish meetings that brings the leaders of the organization together periodically for the purpose of helping one another as an organization in the struggle, for the generally comparing notes and tackling problems together. The day of unity, purposefully and disciplined, striving to liberate our nation is now here. Interestingly, we must be hearing from some defeated terrorists in our land that their nation is marabouts. Rituals, spiritual power have been responsible for making our many Yoruba organizations enemy to one another. And that they say rituals are still being intensified in order to intensify divisions and baseless hostility amongst Yorubas, to generate war by our youth against their elders, war among our important citizens, among our obas, among our political activists, among our different religious groups, etc. While we may laugh at this threat, we must now, as individuals and organizations, to conduct ourselves as to show the enemies of our nation that their rituals and the so-called spiritual weapons are fatal against us. Finally, we must immediately respond to the dangerous situation that is arising for us, Yoruba people in the international community. The situation is that in the office of many international agencies and Department of Foreign Government, officials are beginning to complain that too many organizations are submitting, each organization claiming to be the Yoruba Nation authoritative voice or umbrella organization. While these exist considerably sympathy for the Yoruba cause in many parts of the world, we Yoruba may be hurting our cause by not speaking forth with one voice for the international community. Our official of foreign government recently said the following to his former professor, who is a Yoruba man: "Sir, there is much sympathy for Yoruba Nation's cause everywhere. Congratulations, but you have a problem. Far too many voices are coming around claiming that they are the accredited spokesperson for your nation. Do your people think that attending to many Yoruba leaders is the only thing we deal with in our office? If your people continue to behave like this, you might end up creating the impression that the Yoruba people are not serious and they do not deserve any serious attention we need. Yoruba people are not serious, and we need to change this situation. For the need effective collaboration and united voice, for the following proposals are offered. Because the Yoruba self-determination struggle is now obviously in its final chapter, we must set up the needed structure for the collaboration of the self-determination organization across the world before the end of April 2021. Every one of the self-determination organization, whether single organization or umbrella organization, shall continue to exist as it likes and pursue its agenda as a deliberate weapon for strengthening the Yoruba self-determination struggle. Every Yoruba self-determination organization shall consciously take the decision in its meeting to view every other Yoruba self-determination organization as a co-warrior in the Yoruba self-determination struggle, to ensure any sort of enmity, hostility, negativity, rivalry towards any other Yoruba self-determination organization, to be positive and helpful towards every other Yoruba self-determination organization. We should now give the totality of the Yoruba self-determination struggle the name Yoruba Self-Determination Movement, YSDM, a movement to which all our many organizations are contributing. As a matter of urgent national policy, in order to ensure due respectability and the effect of the Yoruba self-determination cause in the world, all communications and delegation of the Yoruba self-determination movement with all international agencies and foreign governments shall be conducted by one Yoruba united voice. In each country, the president and the secretary of the self-determination organization shall constitute the leadership organ of the Yoruba self-determination movement in that country. This organ shall be known as the Yoruba Self-Determination Leadership Council, YSLC. As it is country thoughts, Yoruba Self-Determination Leadership Council, Nigeria, Yoruba Self-Determination Council, Spain, etc. The Yoruba Self-Determination Leadership Council of each country shall meet periodically, quarterly, monthly, weekly, for the purpose of sharing information, reviewing progress, assessing and tracing problems, updating strategy, logistic, harmonizing measures, tactics for self-determination. The members of the Yoruba Self-Determination Leadership Councils of all countries of the world shall constitute the Yoruba Self-Determination Supreme Council, which shall be the supreme organ of the Yoruba Self-Determination Movement, shall conduct the supreme business of the Yoruba Self-Determination Movement. The Yoruba Self-Determination Supreme Council shall meet by Zoom as often as necessary and made other authorized secret meeting as necessary for the advancement of the Yoruba self-determination struggle, to consider, decide upon, and take necessary actions on the worldwide needs of the Yoruba self-determination struggle, such as establishing a Yoruba self-preservation fund for giving relief to the Yoruba victims of terrorism, for giving assistance to the Yoruba fighters and against terrorism, establishing a Yoruba National Trust Fund as an everlasting backbone of the Yoruba nation, similar to the Jewish National Fund in the modern history of the State of Israel, appointment of envoys for diplomatic mission in international community, appointment of leaders, experts to make the Yoruba self-determination case before the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court of European Union, the African Union, and importantly, the government of the world. Needed lobbies to promote the Yoruba self-determination case before the government and international agency, creating an intelligent agency for the whole struggle, setting up a Yoruba land government in exile when the time for it shall be deemed ripe. Note, members of the Yoruba diaspora worldwide are already taking welcome steps to bring all the Yoruba self-determination organizations in the diaspora together to create directorate. If these steps, they will make of creating a government in exile faster. The Yoruba Self-Determination Supreme Council shall appoint, as it is the coordinating committee, the Yoruba Self-Determination Leadership Council of the Yoruba homeland in Nigeria to convene in its meeting, keep its minute, record, circulate its information. The Yoruba Self-Determination Council of the Yoruba land in Nigeria shall establish a secretariat in the Yoruba homeland in Nigeria. Apart from providing a place of business for the Yoruba Leadership Council Nigeria and the business of the YSSC, this secretariat shall provide space for meetings of self-determination organizations that may need it. There is arising a need for the following as side proposal for the purpose of ending the countless objection contentious among us over the name of our common country. Some have been saying that they do not like this or that name for religious reason. The proposal is that we should simply call our country, common country, Yoruba land, in the way that every nation in the world name their countries. The individual Yoruba person is a Yoruba. We are all Yoruba nation or the Yoruba people. Our language is the Yoruba language and our country shall be Yoruba land very soon. Finally, we have to hold a referendum. Our peaceful process towards our nation's self-determination is the most likely to lead to a referendum, an event like regular election at which we Yoruba will line up at the polls to vote for either self-determination or for the continued membership of our nation in Nigeria. The important question then is, how do we get to the referendum? Question mark. Here are the possibilities. Some nations seek self-determination have been known to simply organize referendum for themselves without waiting for the permission of the government of their countries. Catalonia in Spain has done this, but their referendum was seriously obstructed by the Spanish government. Knowing Nigeria as we do, we must expect that if we try to hold a referendum by ourselves, the Nigerian government will oppose us very brutally. So for us, there is no viable option. If we appeal to the Nigerian government to organize a referendum for us, to allow us to hold a referendum, they will oblige. One of the organizations, Egbomodua, has proposed that we should ask our Southwest State governor to step forward and organize our referendum. Many of the other organizations have expressed support for this, confident that we mount pressure sensibly, powerfully enough, we can get our government to agree to do what we're asking them to do for us. Many of our organizations believe rather that it is more fruitful to pin our hope on the United Nations organization. In recent years, United Nations organization has stepped in some places to organize referendum that led to the immediate creation of a new countries out of the larger countries. For instance, Timor-Leste out of Indonesia, South Sudan from Sudan, etc. Although altogether option 3 and 4 are our most reasonable options. Option 3, our organizations, Egbemodua, has proposed that we should ask our Southwest government. And number 4 was from the United Nations to organize a referendum. Therefore, after we have set up our collaborative structure as proposed above, we must immediately set up task force to lead us to the conclusion of 3 and 4. God Almighty in Olodumare has lifted up this might hand to take us, Yoruba nation, out of the bondage in a destructive Nigeria and to set up as one of the greatest and most prosperous nations state in the modern world. We know that when his mighty hand is stretched forth, nothing can bend it. Thank you so much. That is how far I can go. Have a very good night. Bye for now.